Yo, what's up, guys? Today I'm gonna today I'm gonna do. You know, I need to come up with a new name to I call this. So whenever I'm gonna react, I'm gonna give like thinkers. He calls it whenever he reacts. It's like, hey today, and today I'm gonna be like think. Today we're gonna be watching my think react. I don't remember, but. Maybe saying watching some goobers. I like it. No, I forget about it. Let's just begin with.
The stray bullet struck her right in the stomach. It pierced the skin, but started to slow down as it entered her body fat. Layer by layer, the fat absorbed more of the bullet's energy, like a cushion. And by the time it hit deeper tissue, the bullet had lost most of its force, coming to a stop before hitting any organs and saving her life. The stray bullet. She logged onto the library computer, which connected to the internet via a phone line, and she used it to auto-dial hundreds of other computers until one of them answered. Now, back then, if you had the password, you could access other people's files. So she typed in 0000 as a guess, but to her surprise, it connected, bringing up the FBI database. But since the password was so easy, she just thought it was a computer game. She spent 2 weeks looking through top secret information while the FBI scrambled to find the hacker. And when they finally showed up, they were shocked to find it was a child. They brought her in for questioning and discovered her mother worked for NASA. And because the girls saw the secret files, they thought her mother might have too, meaning she could have lost her job. But instead, they just banned the girl from computers for the next 8 years. She logged on. He slid his head out of the food slot of his prison cell, then used his yoga training to squeeze his shoulders and arms through. And since he had covered himself in ointment, he managed to slip most of his body out of the 5.9-inch hole. When his hips got stuck, he removed his pants, finally slipping all of the way out. And after putting his pants back on, he snuck past the sleeping guards. One guard was fooled by the decoy pillows in his bed, but when they finally realized he was gone, they sent 400 officers after him.
That's a lot.
Now, he managed to dodge them for 6 whole days, until they found him on a rooftop, hiding in a cardboard box. They put him back in a cell, this time with a smaller food slot. He slid. Over 100 gears are fixed into place, and a small gear in the center of each one connects to the teeth of the one next to it. The first one starts turning, which spins the second wheel. But since the smaller gear has 10 times less teeth than the larger one, it has to rotate 10 times before the second gear rotates once. Now, the second and third gears are connected the same way. The center of the second gear has 10 times less teeth than the third, meaning the third gear rotates once for every 10 turns of the second wheel and every 100 turns of the first wheel. By the time it reaches the 25th gear, the first gear has to rotate 1 septillion times for that wheel to turn, and it would have to make 10 quindecillion full rotations before the 50th gear made one full circle. Since each step is 10 times slower than the previous one, that means the last gear would be 1 Google slower than the first. That's 1 with 100 zeros behind it, meaning it would take longer to turn that gear than the entire age of the universe. Overall, the ship crashed between 2 icebergs, throwing the man into a sheet of ice. And he watched as polar bears fed on his crewmates. When one attacked him, he managed to kill it with his knife. But he suddenly realized it had a baby. Out of pity, he raised her as his own, teaching her to fish for him. She even protected him by fighting off other bears. And they lived this way for the next 6 years. Eventually, the man was rescued, but the bear who saved his life was left behind. The ship The bee pukes up the nectar into another bee's mouth, which vomits it into the hive. You see, this nectar is first collected from a flower, where the bee sucks it up and stores it in a special stomach. Next, it starts to break the nectar down, splitting the sugars into separate parts to keep it fresh, before throwing it up over and over again to evaporate some of the water while keeping the sugars. When it gets back to the hive, it vomits it into a receiver bee's mouth, and that bee spits it into a wax cell. Then a group of them fan it out with their wings to evaporate even more water until the sugars are finally harvested as honey. The bee, if you get on your friend's shoulders, put on a trench coat, and try to buy one movie ticket, well, they'll obviously know what you're up to. You see, your weight would make your friend wobble as he walks, and since you still have a child's face, they'll know you're not an adult. Instead, you would need to build a special frame that would hold you up, taking the weight off your friend's shoulders, and a rigid pole would connect you to a harness connected to his hips. Mechanical leg braces would help lift your weight, allowing him to walk straight. And a hyper-real latex mask would change your face, making you look old enough to match the height. If you get on, the metal was constructed together, and children would grab hold of the spokes as they ran in a circle. Once the platform was fast enough, they would jump on, spinning around the pole at high speeds. But the force was so strong that some kids fell off, breaking bones as they landed. Others got caught between the platform and the pole, getting crushed as it swung back and forth, which is why it was finally banned. The metal, if you stack a Pringle on top of another, all facing the same direction, each chip pushes downwards, holding the ones below in place. Now, because the chips are curved, it will cause the stack to curve upwards, and their weight presses on the ones in front, which creates enough friction to keep the chips from slipping. And as you add more Pringles, the sides will continue to curve. Then just rest the last few chips on top, perfectly closing the circle. If you stack a Pringle, they cut the ice from the frozen lakes, transported it back home before storing it in cellars lined with hay to insulate the room. This kept the temperature low, meaning in summer the ice was still frozen. They would begin to crush it and pour it into the outer ring of a wooden barrel, along with some salt. This brought the temperature inside to below freezing, and when flavored ice cream was poured into the inner chamber, it started to freeze when it touched the metal walls. Next, a paddle was hand-turned, mixing the cream and scraping it off the walls. This made ice cream before freezers ever existed. They cut the ice, they removed the lump, sliced it open, revealing hundreds of tiny teeth inside. You see, when the boy was 3, a tumor appeared in his jaw, and as he got older, it only got larger. Now, the tumor was made of the same cells that usually grow teeth. But unlike his gums, it didn't know when to stop. So it kept making more and more. And when the dentist dug into it, they found over 500 teeth crammed inside, with some as small as a grain of sand. So they removed every extra tooth, giving him a normal smile. When you look through a peephole on a door, the outside view is squeezed into one small clear image your eye can focus on. Now from the other side, the same lenses spread the light out, breaking the image apart into a blur, which is why strangers can't see inside. But if someone has this device, it places more lenses over the peephole that catch that scattered light and pull it back together, refocusing it into a clear picture and letting them peek inside, which is why you should invest in a peephole cover. When you look, she took a picture on her phone and made a post telling her followers she had terminal brain cancer, but she told them that she had been healing herself with healthy food and natural medicine, and her posts blew up. Soon she made an app and wrote a cookbook, making hundreds of thousands of dollars, and she promised her followers a lot of the money would go to charity. Then she said her cancer had spread to her organs, but she decided to continue fighting it naturally. For years, her followers cheered her on, but then reporters discovered the only brain scan she had, and it showed that she didn't actually have any tumors, meaning she was never diagnosed with cancer. She was fined for scamming her followers, but she still hasn't paid. She took a picture.
Crazy.
He woke up inside the morgue after accidentally being declared dead. You see, he had gotten into a car crash with his fiancée. Now, she survived the crash, but the man's injuries were so severe that paramedics pronounced him dead. He was put into a freezer drawer for 2 days, but he woke up and started screaming. Workers heard him and rushed to pull him out, and he was finally allowed to go home to his fiancée. But when she saw him, she was terrified, convinced he was a zombie, so she refused to take him back.
Okay.
If you drop a spider into a beer glass, the sides could be too smooth for it to climb out, so it could stick a strand of silk to one wall and attach the other end to the opposite side. Then it adds another strand above it and another, slowly building a web higher and higher up the glass and using it to climb out. But spiders only have so much silk to use, and each new line drains energy, meaning if the glass is too tall, the spider could run out of silk before reaching the rim and die before it finishes the web and escapes. He shoved his arm down the bear's throat, and as it slid down, the bear gagged before letting go of the man and running away. You see, when the man was out hunting, he accidentally woke up this sleeping bear. It pinned him down to the ground, and as he tried to fight back, he remembered his grandma told him that big animals have strong gag reflexes. So when it tried to bite him, he just jammed his fist straight down its throat, which ended up saving his life. He shoved. If a cow is born with 2 heads, they can each have their own working brain. But inside, their shared heart doesn't work correctly, and their lungs are too small. You see, in the cow's womb, a single egg can sometimes split in 2, and this creates identical twins, but if it doesn't split all the way, the body keeps growing halfway separated. This can cause their heart to divide unevenly, and their lungs can collapse while their stomach can form with missing parts, leaving the calf struggling to breathe and eat from the moment it's born. And even if it somehow manages to survive, its body grows weaker as those defects add up, meaning 2-headed calves never live past their 2nd birthday. If a cow is born, he shot twice from the car's window, sending both bullets straight toward the other man's head. But years earlier, that man had been in a car crash, and doctors used a thick metal plate bolted in place to rebuild his skull. So when the bullets reached him, they struck that same side of his head, and the plate deflected them, kicking each round sideways and sending them out the back of his head, instead of straight through his skull. He collapsed on the ground as the car sped away, bleeding but still alive. He lifted the venomous snake to his mouth and swallowed the whole thing whole.
Ew.
Its entire body slid down his throat, and inside his stomach, the snake bent and folded as he moved. Days later, the man pooped it out, and it was
That's
sealed
gross.
in the dry ground. Then, 1,500 years later, archaeologists found the human poop while digging through rocks. They soaked it for 2 weeks and found scales, bones, and 1 fang inside. This led them to believe it was part of some kind of ritual. He lifted. As the crank is turned, gears on one side begin to spin, rotating 2 heavy metal rollers. Then a sheet of hot, soft sugar is dropped between them. Now each roller is covered in tiny carved shapes that repeat all the way around the metal. And as the rollers spin toward each other, they grab the sugar, squeeze it flat like a press, and force it into every groove and pattern. Then a long sheet of connected candy shapes comes out of the bottom. Once it cools and hardens, the thin lines between the shapes turn brittle, so the strips are dropped onto a table, snapping it apart into perfect little candy
Oh, it's
drops.
making me jealous.
She thought it was a runny nose, but the clear liquid was not hot mucus. You see, 2 years earlier, she got into a car crash, hitting her head on the dashboard. This broke the thin bone between her brain and her sinuses, and the fluid filling her skull started to leak out, which she thought was just a runny nose. Soon, she was losing 2 cups of fluid a day, until doctors finally found the hole. They took fat from her belly and plugged it, finally allowing her to live normally. If you were swallowed by a sperm whale, you would be squeezed down its massive throat. You'd continue down the esophagus and into a series of stomach chambers that are filled with digestive acids. And these acids would immediately start breaking down your body. But even if you managed to avoid the acid, the lack of air inside the whale would quickly cause you to suffocate. If you hold open your eyelids and lean over the eye wash station, letting the clean water hit both eyes at once. As it does, look up, down, left, and right. This will flush out the dangerous chemicals before they cause serious damage. Now, some chemicals are strong enough to blind you, even if you wash most of them out. To be sure, keep rinsing for at least 15 minutes. By that time, your eyes should be clear, saving you from going blind.
Okay.
Hold open your eyelids and lean over the eye wash station, letting the clean... If you hold open your eyelids and lean over the eye...
What? Is that all? What the hell? It's gonna begin here then.
They would lock themselves inside a station in the middle of Antarctica, and as the years passed, they would learn how to live completely separated from the rest of humanity. When they started having kids, they would teach them survival skills and their mission in life. These kids would then board a rocket that would take them up to a ship with an entirely artificial world inside. It would be held in a giant spinning tube that would mimic gravity. And once they had children, they would pass on what their parents taught them, continuing the cycle for 400 years as the spaceship inched deeper into space until they finally reached Proxima B, an Earth-sized planet that might be able to support life.
That's cool.
His fingers would be slipped between the metal rings on the frame, turning the gun into brass knuckles. Now, the cylinder held 6 rounds, each with a metal pin sticking out. When the hammer came back, it smacked the pin to fire a shot. But since there wasn't a barrel, the gun only worked at close range. So if he got too close to the enemy, he could just unfold the knife from the frame and use it for stabbing while punching with the brass knuckles. Then it all folds up neatly until he needs it again. The beetle rolls its poop ball in a perfectly straight line in the dark. And you might think this is because it has night vision, but it's actually not even looking at where it's going. You see, once the ball is packed, the beetle climbs on top, spins around, and looks up. Now, its eyes are too weak to really see anything in the sky, but the glowing band of the Milky Way is so bright, the beetle can see it against the dark night sky. So it lines itself up with this glowing band and rolls straight ahead, stopping occasionally to make sure that it's still lined up. And when scientists blocked the beetles from seeing the stars, almost immediately they began wandering in circles. But under a clear night sky, they rolled straight ahead, using the galaxy as a map. The beetle rolls it.
Cool.
He lowered the chunk of meat straight into a man's open stomach.
Oh my god, again. Why?
And inside, the acid began softening and breaking the meat apart. You see, years earlier, a fur trader had survived a gunshot wound, but the bullets left a hole in his stomach that would never close. Now, back then, people thought the stomach crushed food up like a grinder.
What?
And the surgeon realized he could use this hole to figure out how the stomach actually worked. So he dropped meat and vegetables inside, then pulled them back out to see how far they broke down. Then he drained stomach acid with a siphon and tested it in glass vials. And his experiments proved that digestion was powered by stomach acid, not by grinding food. He turned himself into the police, but they agreed to let him build his own prison. And when he was done, his prison included a soccer field, a sauna, and a waterfall. Inside was a jacuzzi, along with a fully stocked bar and a gym. It even had its own private nightclub. Guests would be smuggled in via supply trucks, allowing the so-called prisoner to host massive parties. But just over a year into his sentence, he escaped through a false wall, according to rumors, and he stayed hidden for another 17 months. He turned himself into. He placed the PS4 on the grocery scale, and it printed a produce sticker that he put onto the console. At the self-checkout, there was no cashier, so he scanned the barcode himself, and it rang up the PS4 as produce, meaning he only paid $10. Then he sold the console so he could afford a train ticket back to his home. And when he came back the next day to try it again, security caught him. Now, he avoided jail, but the guilty verdict stayed on his record. Push the needle through the banana along one of the ridges, making sure not to pierce through the other side of the skin. Then turn the needle side to side before pulling it out again. Keep going all the way down, pushing the needle in every half inch. Now, if you flip it, it looks like a normal banana, but when you peel it, the slices appear, showing the banana pre-sliced as if by magic. A thin scope slides down the baby's throat and inflates a balloon in the windpipe, sealing it shut. You see, a defect in the diaphragm lets organs crowd the lungs, stopping them from growing. But the balloon traps fluid inside, stretching the lungs bigger. And before birth, doctors remove the balloon so the baby can breathe, giving the lungs a chance to grow strong enough to survive. But the surgery could break the mother's water, causing labor to start too early. And when removing the balloon, even one tiny slip could collapse the baby's airway, meaning even a small mistake could be deadly. A thin scope slides. If you were born on the moon and traveled back to Earth, you would immediately be pinned to the ground. You see, normal humans are constantly pulled downward toward Earth, which makes their bones thicker, while their muscles grow under that pressure. But if you were born on the moon, the gravity is much weaker, meaning your bones and muscles wouldn't be as strong. So to fix this, scientists designed a massive glass cone that would slowly rotate on the moon's surface. As it spins, your body would get pushed outwards against the floor, and that push would feel just like Earth's gravity. So instead of floating around, you would just walk, meaning your bones and muscles would develop normally, and when you finally visited Earth, your body could handle the gravity. They fired the gun at the house. As you drank, the beer would spill out of the holes in the neck. Now, most people would cover the neck, thinking it's just a jug with holes in it. But extra spouts in the rim still spill beer in every direction, meaning you would still be covered in beer. Instead, look for the hidden hole at the back of the jug inside the handle. Cover it with your finger, then cover 2 of the spouts. This creates a closed tube, running from the bottom of the jug up to the handle and into the rim. Now, when you suck on the 3rd spout, beer is pulled through this secret tube and out the open spout, avoiding the other holes altogether.
That's cool.
He pulled the net out of the water only to find it empty, and he had already gone weeks without catching anything, meaning he could barely support himself. But suddenly, a massive school of fish swam under his boat, so he tossed his net overboard and started hauling them in. Finally, it felt like his luck had turned, but as the pile grew heavier, he didn't notice how unstable his boat was getting until it suddenly tipped. The man fell into the water and drowned, ending the best day of his life in tragedy. He pulled the net out. When you set it to the number 5, a gear gets moved into place on the internal cylinder. And when you turn the main handle, the steps on the cylinder rotate the gear, which shows the number on the top of the calculator. Now, if you want to add 3 and 5 together, you choose 3 on the barrel. And when you turn the handle, it adds 3 more steps, showing the answer on top. Now, if you want to multiply 538 by 200, 100, you can set the first number on the barrel, then change the place value above it, with 1 being single numbers, 2 being tens, 3 being hundreds, and so on. So to multiply it 200 times, you just set the place value to 3, and then turn the handle twice to give you the answer. When you set it to the number 5, if you tried to surf on a tsunami, you might think that you could ride it for miles, but tsunamis don't curl like surf waves. Instead, they shoot up.
Yo, let's try it. I want to see these older ones. Let's check them out. Alright, let's check them out.
As she yawned, the round end of her jawbone
Oh my.
slid out of its socket, and the muscles around it pulled tight but couldn't push the bone back in place, leaving her jaw stuck wide open. At the hospital, doctors took x-rays and saw the joint was dislocated. She waited for hours, jaw still hanging open, until they finally sedated her. Then 4 doctors pushed and pulled until the bone finally popped back into its socket. As she yawned, if you say a curse word, your parrot could repeat the word back perfectly. And if it escapes, it could teach other birds the curse word. You see, parrots naturally copy the sounds they hear the most. And in the wild, showing off new calls makes them seem smarter. Soon, other birds will quickly copy the words and even teach them to their babies, meaning entire flocks might end up learning your favorite curse word. While hiking, the boy began pointing at the air, saying he saw snowmen and Kermit the Frog. His dad tried to get him to focus, but he turned and walked toward the edge of a cliff, falling 120 feet into the rocks below.
way.
You see, his brain wasn't getting enough oxygen in the thin air, and this caused him to hallucinate. His dad stayed with him for 6 hours as rescue teams worked to reach them. The fall broke several bones and gave him a serious head injury, but somehow he survived. While they lit the fluid pouring from the cannon, which blasted liquid fire toward the enemy ship. But as they threw water on it, the flames only got bigger. You see, Greek fire stuck to anything it landed on, and it could even burn on the sea. So they launched jars of it at other ships, and even pumped it through small hoses like flamethrowers. And the recipe was so secret that legend says when a man tried to leak it, he burst into flames and died. To this day, we still don't know how it was made. They lit the fluid. He crawled inside the dinosaur statue, but as he did, he slipped, falling headfirst into its leg. He struggled to get out, but he was stuck upside down, and he slowly suffocated inside. It was only 2 days later that people noticed a bad smell, and when they peeked through a crack, they saw the man's dead body. Rescuers had to cut the leg open to pull him out, but no one knows for sure why he was in there. You would wear a clear plastic dome over your head while running, and inside, small plants sit mounted around the rim, while microphones and speakers allow you to talk through the dome. As you breathe, the plants absorb your carbon dioxide and release oxygen back into the helmet. Now, this was designed to work as a tiny greenhouse to recycle your breath, but the few plants inside can't make enough oxygen to replace what you're breathing, and the sealed dome would just fog up, while any movement could cause the plants to fall on your face, meaning it was never made.
Okay.
They threw a live grenade into the field where they were training, but their dog thought it was just another game of catch. He ran into the field, picking it up in his mouth. They screamed and waved their arms, desperately trying to stop the dog as it raced towards them. They threw rocks at him to scare him off. He paused, confused, tail still wagging. Then the grenade exploded. The dog was blown to pieces right in front of them.
God, that's
They
disgusting.
threw a live As the plane climbs higher, the air inside your body pushes against your eardrums until it feels like they're about to burst. That's because the pressure outside drops fast, and this affects the pocket of air behind your eardrum, causing a pressure difference that stretches it outwards. But before it does actually burst, a tube connected to your throat balances the pressure by releasing air with a pop. And when you go lower, your eardrum is pushed inwards until the tube pops air back in. As the plane climbs higher, a black bear ripped straight through the fabric of the Boy Scouts' tent and dragged the boy out onto the ground. The bear scratched at him as it pulled, with its teeth digging into his body, but he curled into a tight ball, playing dead. Behind him, the scout leader banged pots together and flashed headlights to scare the bear away. Finally, it let go and stumbled off into the trees. The boy had deep scratches and bruises, but playing dead kept him alive. A black bear ripped.
Cool.
He left the water bottle on his seat, but as the sunlight reached it, it hit the bottle at just the right angle, and when the light passed through the water, it came out the other side as a focused beam. This concentrated the light, causing the seat to burn, and the man only noticed when he saw the smoke, meaning you should never leave bottled water in the sun. He left the water. He started to fill his own restaurant with water, completely flooding it. You see, the building sat right on the riverbank, and when the river spilled over, dirty floodwater full of mud and debris would surge inside. But by pumping in clean water first, the weight pushes the walls from the inside, as the floodwater pushes from the outside. This creates a seal and stops the dirty floodwater from rushing in. And when the storm passed, he would just pump the water back out and dry it, reducing damage and saving him thousands.
That's great.
He's holding nothing but a cane. The man looks like he's floating. But if you take this trick apart, you'll see there's actually a strong metal frame sitting on the ground. And attached to this is a short rod. The frame is covered with a cloth, and the rod sticks up, allowing the performer to place the cane on top, which has a special arm attached. This is threaded through the sleeve of the performer's jacket before he attaches a solid steel platform to the arm. And when he sits on it, he slips the platform into the seat of his pants before slipping his arm through the jacket, covering the entire structure, which is fully supporting his weight.
That's
Holding
really
nothing
cool.
while sweeping, he tilted his hand over a truck's fuel tank, dropping in a handful of dirt, which ended up breaking the engine. And no one ever suspected him because he acted stupid. You see, he was captured during the Vietnam War, and instead of fighting back, he just pretended to be dumb. He acted like he couldn't read or understand orders, convincing the guards that he wasn't smart enough to cause trouble. But behind that act, he memorized the names of over 250 prisoners, and he even learned the exact location of the camp by watching closely when guards took him into town for fake glasses fittings. When he was finally released, he went back to the US and told them all the information he gathered, which ended up saving hundreds of prisoners. Face the wall, take 2 steps back, put your head against the wall, grab the chair, and try to stand up. If you're a man, this is most likely impossible, and if you're a woman, it should be a breeze. You see, if you have bigger feet, those 2 steps at the beginning will be larger, moving you farther from the wall. And if your torso is longer, your center of gravity sits around your chest, which is why men just end up headbutting the wall. But women usually have smaller feet, so they stand closer to the wall, and their center of gravity is around their hips, allowing them to stand up easily.
I did it before. It was easy. It's just difficult to pick up the chair.
A wire is connected to a drone, which flies up into the thunderstorm. As the air gets charged with electricity from the storm, a switch is flipped, sending thousands of volts through the wire. This triggers a lightning strike, and when the lightning hits the drone's protective metal cage, it redirects the electricity into the wire. When it reaches the end of the line, it moves into the ground and away from buildings, protecting the city from dangerous lightning strikes. A wire is connected. They installed jacks and rollers under the building, while people were still working inside. Then the huge building rolled slowly along a curved set of rails, and each time it moved off one roller, another one was placed in front. Hand-turned jacks were used to move the building along, as well as a steam-powered engine. And extra-long phone cables were installed so the business could keep running. The building pivoted, moving 15 inches per hour, so slow that the people inside didn't even feel it. And after 30 days, the building had rotated 90 degrees and moved 100 feet to its new place.
That's crazy.
The kids were happily doodling when the man dangled a shiny star in front of them, explaining that they would get one for each picture they drew. As the days passed, they stopped coming up with new ideas, only trying to get out as much art as possible so they could get more stars. And when the stars finally ran out, some of the kids gave up on drawing altogether, even though they had loved it beforehand. You see, when they started wanting the reward, it replaced the excitement from drawing. And after the stars disappeared, their love for art did too. So when you attach rewards to your passions, you can sometimes forget why you cared about it in the first place, until you just completely stop enjoying it altogether. They wheeled him in to harvest his organs, but he started to move. You see, they said he was brain dead after an overdose and prepped him for organ donation. But he started moaning, and tears rolled down his cheeks. Now, some doctors refused to go through with it, but the organ team allegedly still wanted to continue. In the end, the surgery was called off, and the man thankfully survived. They wheeled him in.
Okay.
If you dump a giant ice cube in a volcano, could you stop an eruption? Well, a single volcano releases millions of tons of lava, which burns at over 2,000 degrees.
That's
to cool it
very
instantly, you would need to freeze Lake Michigan, rip it out of the ground, and throw it in the volcano. But instead of stopping the eruption, the ice would just vaporize on contact. This would expand rapidly, building pressure inside the volcano, and violent explosions would blast out superheated steam and molten rocks for miles, causing more damage than the eruption itself. As they pulled into the garage and the door was closing, two masked men slipped inside. They forced the parents into the trunk at gunpoint before driving away. Finally, they stopped the car and demanded the couple's bank cards and codes before shutting them back in the trunk and abandoning them. The woman knew they could die in there, so she desperately pulled at the cables in the trunk, hoping it would do something. Finally, she noticed a small metal cable, and when her husband pulled it, they heard a click. The trunk door opened, and after they escaped, she started a campaign, which is why every car now has a glow-in-the-dark release lever inside the trunk. As they pulled into the garage, he stepped onto the scaffold when a cable snapped, and the whole thing suddenly collapsed. It fell over 500 feet, but the man held on, riding the platform like a surfboard through the air. An updraft between the buildings slowed his fall just a little, and when the scaffold hit the ground, he was thrown off, landing on a pile of cables. He had 10 shattered bones, collapsed lungs, and clots in his brain. But somehow he was still alive. Doctors replaced all his blood twice, and he needed 16 surgeries. But eventually, he learned to walk
Damn,
again.
it recovered?
He stepped onto the scaffold when a cable snapped, and the whole thing suddenly collapsed. It fell over 500 feet, but the man held on, riding the platform like a surfboard through the air. An updraft.
Alright.
Two rods are fixed together. Then the first rod spins slowly around the center. And as they turn together, the tip of the second rod draws a line in space, spinning pi times faster than the first rod. Now, if pi were a normal fraction, that line would loop around and eventually return to its starting point. But since the digits go on forever without repeating, the line never closes. Instead, each new loop just barely misses the old one, since pi never repeats. And it just keeps twisting into new shapes, never repeating the same trajectory twice. Two rods are fixed together.
Okay.
Then He left to sell cattle, but never came back. For years, his family searched tirelessly, and thinking he died, they even held memorials for him. But 30 years later, he suddenly reappeared, wearing the same exact clothes and holding the train ticket from the day he went missing. Now, he couldn't remember anything from when he was gone and insisted that he was home all along. Now, some think he was kidnapped by aliens, while others think the government took him for secret testing, but to this day, no one knows where he was for those 30 years. He left. If you press your finger onto a mirror and the reflection lines up perfectly tip to tip, it means that there's a thin metallic coating right on front of the glass. And since the room is brightly lit, the coating bounces light back at you, looking like a normal mirror. But on the other side, the room is completely dark, allowing the mirror to look transparent from that side, meaning someone could watch everything you do while you only see your own reflection. Just remember, if there's a tiny gap between your nail and the reflection, it's likely a normal mirror, but if they touch tip to tip, leave. If you press your finger onto a mirror and the reflection lines up perfectly tip to tip, it means...
Then this video. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and see you. Bye!